Awesome. It looks like people are starting to join. Good morning, everyone. Just so y'all know, everyone should be muted, and I can repeat this right before we start. Everyone should be muted, and if you're not, please go ahead and do that. We will be using the chat function, so if you have any comments throughout the presentation, feel free to put them there, and then Q&A, we will also be using that function as well. So we'll put questions in particular in the Q&A. So good morning to everyone who's joining. We'll give it just a few more minutes. Okay, I know it's 11:01. So let me go ahead and get things pulled up. People are coming in. If y'all joined just now, welcome. We are so glad you're here this morning. I was just saying earlier that we will be using the chat function. And so if you have comments, feel free to put those in the chat. If you have questions, particularly put those in the Q&A because I will be doing Q&A at the end and particularly looking at the Q&A app. So if you have questions there, please feel free to put those in there. I'm happy to get to those at the end. If I have time in the middle, I may answer some. And just make sure everyone, I think, should be muted, but if not, please go ahead and do so. Just making sure everybody, we get most people on before we begin. It's a nice day to have a webinar. It's nice and, oh, it's actually getting sunny. It was raining. So we will do our best to end on time so everybody can go outside and enjoy the weather. Okay. Let me go ahead and begin sharing my screen. Okay. Oops. Here. Awesome. Okay. Can everybody see my screen okay? We have some people from Houston. I like it. Awesome. Okay. All right, y'all. So let's go ahead and get going. My name is Emily Anderson, and I'm the garden coordinator for the North Texas Food Bank. Thank you again for joining us on this Saturday morning. So what I do as the garden coordinator at the food bank is there is a garden on site at the food bank, and I manage the garden on site. It's a teaching demonstration garden, and right now we're mainly harvesting what we harvest. We're donating to a food pantry in Plano. So just a few minutes away from the food bank. So that's what I do. And then I also manage things like this, our community workshops and outreach and education. So that's a little bit about what I do. Before we get going, just one more quick reminder to make sure that you're on mute. Use the chat box for comments, and then particularly use the Q&A for questions, and I'll get to those at the end when we have time. All right. Okay, so yes, today we're going to be talking about gardening basics. This is going to be an overview of what to think about whenever you are beginning a vegetable garden. Some of these topics I'll go more in depth in with other monthly workshops that we'll be hosting through the food bank. So be on the lookout for those. We're hoping to host one a month, and they will be virtual. So if I touch on something and you have a question about it and we didn't get to answer it, you can either do Q&A or we'll probably hit it more in depth in a future topic through the food bank. I always like to start out these webinars saying that gardening can be as complex or as simple as you want it to be. I do believe you can garden on any budget. You can garden with any type of space. You can garden if you're in an apartment, or if you are in, if you're in a duplex, or if you do have some acreage or a backyard. You can garden in all of those spaces. So long as there's sufficient sunlight, you're good to go. I saw someone's joining us from California. California can grow anything anywhere. I'm a little bit jealous of that. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. Okay, so before we talk about reading a seed packet, I want to just explain just a little bit on what these pictures are on the right. So they are called, this is the plant hardiness zone map. And what this map does is basically say what plants grow well in your area. So oftentimes, like when nurseries in your area, wherever you are, more than likely will be selling plants that actually grow well where you are. However, sometimes you may want a special order plant, or a nursery doesn't have a large stock of whatever you want, and so it's a little bit of a challenge to grow in your area, but you still can grow it. So this just helps you know what you can plant. And a lot of the times at nurseries, plant tags will say, or even seed packets may say, this is good for growing in zones 7 through 9. Well, according to this map, if you can see here, we're in zone 8A. So we're in that light Dallas is. So we're in that light yellow color. I have a red circle around Dallas. This map is based off of the average annual extreme minimum temperature. It's a mouthful. But basically what it's saying is in zone 8A, where Dallas is, the average extreme minimum temperature is 10 to 15 degrees. It has been a while since I have experienced that temperature, and I'm so thankful for that. So that's where we are. So zone 8A, that is where, zone 8, plants for zone 8, that is where we are. So we can grow plants there. All right. So reading a seed packet. If you've gardened before, you probably understand how to read a seed packet. I have a couple of examples from different companies of seeds, because all packets look a little bit different. They generally have the same information on them. One note I do want to make about botanical interest, which is the packet on the right. That seed packet has information actually inside the packet that's like printed inside. So don't be too quick to throw those packets away, because they have information on the outside as well as on the inside. And speaking of seeds, Botanical Interest and Baker Creek Seeds, those are two really good, reliable companies to get seeds from. I really, really like ordering from both of those. If you are in the North Dallas area, the Botanical Interest is sold at Callaway's and North Haven Gardens. Baker Creek might be as well, but they're easily accessible to get online. Okay, so what I really want to talk about with these two packets right here are the different types of seeds that you see on the front. So the mustard green packet says open pollinated, and then the carrot packet says heirloom seeds. So there is a difference. Open pollinated seeds means that the plants where the seeds were gathered from, those are pollinated naturally through animals, insects, wind, that kind of thing. So it wasn't controlled. Whereas heirloom seeds, they are also open pollinated, but the seeds have been collected for generations. So they are very well adapted to the area. They have good longevity. So they've been collected for many, many years. So both of them are open pollinated. Heirloom seeds have just been collected for longer. Now, if you're somebody who wants to save your seeds from your plants, then these two are really great types of seeds to save your seeds from. If you are buying a plant that is an F1 or a hybrid, those are pollinated in a controlled environment by people. The seeds from those plants are really not very viable at all. So you don't want to save the seeds from those. It's better to save the seeds from open pollinated or heirloom seeds. And Baker Creek sells a lot of heirloom seeds if you are interested in that. Okay, so reading a seed packet, continuing on this, what I want to draw your attention to, again, pretty much the same information, it just looks different. Talks about the seed depth, talks about how far away to plant each plant, that kind of thing. So what I want to talk about is when to sow outside. I'm going to look at the screen because it's bigger for me to see. So it says recommended. Seed packets were not made with Texas conditions in mind. So bear that in mind as you think about when to plant your seeds. Recommended really for us, look at the weather forecast. You know, and a lot of things are based off of freeze dates, first frost date, last frost date, which we'll talk about that in a second. So let's see what it says. When to sow outside, this is recommended 2 to 4 weeks before average last frost and when soil temperature is at least 45 degrees. Okay, again, we're going to be watching the weather conditions 2 to 4 weeks before average last frost. For us, average last frost is, I think, about March 16th. Our first frost of the year is about mid-November, give or take a couple of days or a couple of weeks. We've all, I think, experienced very late frost. I've experienced snow on Easter in April. So you just quite never know. It's always kind of a guesstimation. So then it says successive sowing. Every 3 weeks until 60 days before first fall frost, which North Texas, that's mid-November. In very warm climates, carrots are grown primarily in fall, winter, and spring when the soil temperature is 60 to 85. All right, so successive sowing. Successive sowing is when you stagger when you plant your seeds, so you can stagger when you harvest. So for example, let's say you have mustard greens. They grow really well in a container, as the seed packet says, and you plant one pot of mustard greens. Okay, you wait a week or two, and then you plant seeds in another pot. Wait another week or two, and then plant seeds in another pot. So they're going to be ready to be harvested at different times, at different stages, and that allows you to harvest for longer. Instead of planting all 3 pots at one time and harvesting a whole lot of mustard greens at one time, you have a successive, you're going to be harvesting in a succession. Last year, I had a great crop of tomatoes. In Texas, tomatoes are hard to grow, but I got the Roma and cherry tomatoes to work. So if you had trouble with that, maybe try those. And I planted all of mine at once, and then I had like 3 to 4 weeks of like 30 pounds of tomatoes each week. It would have been nice to have spread that out. So successive sowing is really helpful in that regard. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about seed depth really quick. Most seeds are really small, and they only want to be planted, most of them about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch. Now, the front of your pointer finger is about 1 inch, and let's see, this the mustard greens only want to be buried about 1/4 of an inch deep, so really not that deep at all. Planting, by each hole individually for each plant, or maybe making a row, that can be kind of tedious and difficult when you don't want to bury them too deep, but you still need to cover them up some. So one way to do that is, in this video, I broadcast my seeds because most seeds are really small. So I broadcast them like chicken feed, and then I took my hands and kind of made claws and kind of disturbed the soil really lightly, and then I lightly patted it down. So that's one way to do it if you don't want to make painstaking holes, if that's difficult and tedious. Another thing I want to talk about is transplanting. So if you do, oftentimes, no matter how you plant your seeds, whether it's broadcasting or if you are, making a row or planting it hole by hole, you're going to want to plant more than one seed because not all seeds are going to germinate. So it depends on the number of seeds you plant, depends on how well the seeds were stored. So you want it to be in kind of a cool, dark place with a controlled temperature. That's ideal. But sometimes if they weren't kept super in a nice controlled environment, then the seeds won't stay viable for as long. But anyways, regardless, you're going to want to plant a couple of seeds, more than one. So that means that you're probably going to need to thin. It's pretty much inevitable. So whenever you thin, there's a couple of things you can do instead of just tossing out the plants that are too close together. What you can do is, if they are greens, feel free to harvest them as little greens and eat them. Restaurants pay big bucks for microgreens, and you could grow them for free in your backyard. great, nutritious, you know, put them on a salad, put it on a sandwich, whatever. Same with sprouts. If you're growing things and you're thinning them at a really young stage as a sprout, put them on a sandwich, put them on a salad. So you can definitely eat those as well. And then the last thing is if you're transplanting your plants, if you're thinning them out at a more mature stage, if you do it carefully enough, you can transplant it to another part of your garden. We've had great success with that at Jan's garden, which is the garden at the food bank, especially with greens. They did really well. We really packed them in tight, and then we just moved them to different areas of the garden where we had more open space. So that's another little tidbit that you can do with transplants as well. Okay, days to harvest. So this is a pretty self-explanatory one. The reason I wanted to talk about it for just a minute is because days to harvest and days to maturity are used interchangeably, but they can mean different things. So days to harvest, length of time until the plant is ready to be harvested. That makes sense. Most seed packets are going to say harvest, like this one, in 1.5 months. And that's talking about from when you planted it by seed until it's ready to be harvested and has like nice big leaves to harvest. Okay, the difference of days to maturity is going to be dependent on how you started the seed. So for seeds that you started in the ground, time to maturity is from when the seed was planted outside until it's harvested. Okay, it's pretty much days to harvest. If a seed is started indoors and then transplanted outside, time to maturity is from when the seedlings are planted outside until they're ready to be harvested. So you start counting at different times. I bought pepper seeds like earlier this week, and the packet said days to maturity, 65 days from transplanting. So it specified really well. Okay, I know when to start counting to know when it's going to be ready. So that's just a quick little differentiation between terminology. Okay, subclimates. So subclimates are, okay, let me start with this. Subclimates are a climate within another climate. Let's say in Texas, where probably most of us on this call are, we're hot. We have, and the person I saw in California, y'all are mild, but you get hot sometimes. So our climate is either hot or not as hot, hot or warm pretty much. So that's how Texas climate is. Smaller climates like these subclimates or microclimates are going to be unique and individual to where all of y'all live. So your homes have your own microclimate, and there are different factors that go into establishing a microclimate and creating one. And these can be shade, sun, moisture, drainage, house orientation, and temperature, as well as protection. But even if you're in an apartment complex, like your microclimate is going to be different than your neighbors next door. So, and again, all these factors play into that. So like, for example, if you have a half of your yard that's sunny, you can grow vegetables there if it gets full sun. If you have, if you have a really shady part of your yard, you can't grow vegetables there. You can grow ferns, things that grow in the shade. The climate in those two places are different. In the shade, the temperature is probably cooler. It may even have a harder time when it rains, like draining. It may stay moist for longer than the sunny side of your house or in the sunny side of your yard. So it just really changes a lot of things. So keep that in mind. Microclimates will affect what you can plant in your yard or wherever you are. And it can affect your need to cover for frosts and freezes, which we'll talk about that in just a second. And one thing I do want to point out in particular with microclimates, house orientation is a big one. So your north side of your house is going to be the coolest one. It's not going to get great sunlight probably. So the north and the east sides are going to be the coolest, north being the most cold. Then north or south and west, those two sides are going to be your warmest. And just be mindful in the summer when you are planting your vegetable crops, because vegetables need at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. If you're planting your plants in the sunny part of your home and all they get is that west evening sun, 4 to 5 hours might be enough for your plants, because that west sun is hot in the warmer months. And we all know that. So it can easily scorch your plants. So just be mindful of that. Maybe put it in some dappled shade if it only gets afternoon sun. That's something to think about too. So house orientation can really, and you don't want to plant your vegetables on the north side of your house. That's not going to get enough sun. Eastern side, if you get a decent morning sun, you might be able to swing it. But again, like make sure that we get pretty good morning sun in the winter month or summer months, in the warmer ones. But west is definitely going to be one of the better sides to grow vegetables in particular. Okay. Fundamentals for healthy garden. This is just a general overview, again, of things to think about in your garden. Maintenance, let's start with that one. Plan a garden that you can feasibly take care of. Okay, so if you don't want to be out in your yard, bending over the bed, being out there a couple times a week, scouting for bugs, getting in the dirt, weeding, then start with some pots. Pots are a great place to grow produce. Pretty much all produce can be grown in a pot. Anything that's about 1 foot wide and at least 1 foot deep, you're pretty much good to go there. 5-gallon buckets can be converted to being planters. We grew hot peppers really well in 5-gallon buckets last year. So, and we have a video on how to make that at the North Texas Food Bank on our website. So if you want to look into that, but establish a garden size that you can manage, that you want to manage. It's better to start out small and grow each year or each season than it is to start off with more than you can chew. Okay, water and irrigation. You're probably thinking, yes, of course, water and irrigation, but it can be amazing how this can slip through the cracks. So be sure that wherever you're going to plant your garden or put your pots, make sure that you have a water source nearby that's easily accessible. Whether that be a spigot with a hose that you attach a shower head to, one of those like shower adjustable sprinkler heads, or maybe you install irrigation or you put in drip irrigation. Whatever works for you, but make sure there's a good working water source where you can water your plants. Also, plant based on similar water needs. So what I mean by this is, plants that need a lot of water, plant those close together. Plants that don't need a lot of water, okay, plant those together. For example, you don't want to plant peppers, which are going to need a lot of water in the summer, next to rosemary, which is drought tolerant. Your rosemary is going to be wilting and not happy while your peppers are really thriving if you water it a lot. So it's something to keep in mind. Sunlight. We just talked about sunlight. Vegetables do best with 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day. If they only get that western afternoon sun, remember 4 to 5 hours might be enough. Maybe that's where you can plant them in some dappled shade. So sunlight is really important. Soil and fertilizer. It's really wise to get your soil tested before you start planting so you know what nutrients are needed. There's plenty of at-home soil test kits that you can get online. You can also get soil samples and then send it to your AgriLife Extension office. So for us, it'd be Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. You send it to their soil office, they test it, and they'll tell you the macronutrients that are needed and your micronutrients or your trace nutrients. So plants, the macronutrients that your plants need are nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. Those are the 3 big ones. Most fertilizer bags are going to have NPK. That's what those mean. But you also have a lot of trace nutrients that your plants need in some amounts. So that they'll give you a more detailed note, your extension office, of what is needed. But either one will work fine. You can also just start with like an all-around organic fertilizer. If you're here in the North Texas area, I love to use, it's called Dirt Diet. It's from Wells Brothers up in Plano. I think it's Wells Brothers Feed Store, I think is the name of it. But anyways, theirs is great. I think they make it their own. They make it themselves and it comes in pellets. And anyways, so it's really great. It's a really good all-around fertilizer. A couple other ones that I use are a foliar spray, so liquid seaweed, love that. Fish emulsions, very high in nitrogen, very fast acting. I really enjoy using that as well. So there's some organic fertilizers that can get you started. Compost is not actually a fertilizer, it's a soil amendment, but I have it on here because it's great. Compost, when in doubt, that's what my first go-to is compost. If something doesn't look too great, I'll just put some compost around the base of the plant. You can never really have too much compost. It boosts immunity. It adds great, organic matter to your soil. It's really good. Site selection. Again, this goes back to accessibility. Make sure that you plant your garden or put your garden or your pots in an area where you can easily get to it and it can easily be watered. And then the last part It's trial and error. If you have gardened at all, or if you've grown houseplants, you know that it's trial and error, and gardening is a constant experiment. My motto is when in doubt, try. We've all killed plants, maybe some like more than we want to admit, but we've all been there, and that doesn't mean that you can't grow anything. So keep trying. I know you can succeed. Okay, so let's talk about watering. Again, this is probably something that you're familiar with, and you've watered things, and it's all hunky-dory. But here are some tips to make your watering more efficient. So the first thing is to put your, if you have like an attachment to a hose, put it on a gentle watering mode, such as shower. Another good one is mist. If you just planted seeds in soil, mist is probably the best one to use, because shower can sometimes be a little strong. And even with that setting, you want to turn it on lightly, because it can splash out soil if it's too strong. It can splash out the seeds. It can bury the seeds too deep. So you just want to get it nice and soaked when you first plant seeds. So just be mindful that there's a gentle watering mode on. You also want to use a gentle back and forth motion. It's going to be better to go back and forth, watch the water soak into the pots, down into the soil before you go back over it again, because plants can only soak in so much water at one time. So if you just have your water hose on one spot for 10 seconds and then move it to another spot for 10 seconds, you're really not doing a whole lot of good for your plants. The soil's going to run out, the seed's going to run out. So, slowly back and forth, maybe 3 or 4 times is what's needed to make sure you soaked it really well. And then to check if your plants are watered enough, you can just do the finger test where you just stick it in the soil. If it's moist up to your middle knuckle of your pointer finger, you're good to go. If it's dry, then it needs water. Pots dry out much faster than in ground beds. So when those warmer months hit, be sure that you're checking those pots every day. It can be amazing how fast they dry out. And I do want to say that if you do have pots and they get really wilty, just water the heck out of them, come back the next day. Chances are they will perk back up, at least some. I cannot tell you how many times I have watered plants close to death. They look dead and they come back. So plants can be resilient. And then the last thing, and this is really important, is whenever you water your plants, try to water only the base of the plant and the soil and the roots. If you, because plant diseases are spread through water. Water is a huge vector for diseases. So the wetter you get your leaves, the more likely there's going to be a disease. So make sure that you just water at the base of the plant and the soil, and it'll be much better. Okay, so let's talk about some planting guides. No matter where you are, there are probably tons of planting guides for your area. It can be really hard to know, and they all will generally be the same, but it can be really hard to know, okay, which one do I follow? Which one's my favorite? Do I need to cross-check with this calendar? So for those of you in North Texas, I just wanted to share 2 of my favorite planting guides. If you're not from Texas, I bet your extension agencies have a planting calendar for your area. All right, so the first one on the right is Texas A&M AgriLife Extensions. Theirs is great, very easy to read. It has, as you can see, I don't know if you can see it very well, but it has like the vegetable and the date next to it. Okay, next to each other, so you know when to plant that. North Haven Gardens, that is a local nursery here in North Dallas, and that one's really great too. This one has it by the month, and then everything that can be planted in that month, and if it's indoor or outdoor. So very, very much recommend these 2. These are my go-tos. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the spring crops that you will be planting this year. Again, regardless of what area you're in, the spring crops will be generally the same. The planting dates will just be different. Okay, so for here in Dallas, average last frost date, March 16th. We'll keep that in mind. I am going to pinpoint on a few of these specific areas on this calendar. The first one being eggplant and peppers. So those are planted mid-January through March. And eggplant, tomatoes, and peppers must be started on a heat mat indoors, okay? Those are the only 3 warm season crops that need to be started on a heat mat inside. Okay, so tomatoes have already gotten started. They were in January. You can still try to grow some if you want to. It's January through today. And then peppers and eggplants, we're in the thick of it, and you can go ahead and start those. If you haven't gotten your seeds, there's still time. You can get them. I was just at Callaway's here in North Dallas a couple weeks ago, or earlier this week, and they had seeds in stock. 2020 was hard to find seeds, but they have them right now. So if you want to go get them, feel free. Okay, another thing I want to point out is peas. So the window to plant peas for here in North Dallas is 10 days. February 10th through February 1st through February 10th. That's a short window. I have planted outside of that window before with not much luck. Okay, so I know that we can still have some frosts and freezes, but peas do well. They're a cooler season crop. So if you want to get peas, go out and get them today in the next few days and plant them. All right, so February 1st through March 1st, I wanted to point this out because this is basically all transplants. All right, transplants can go in the ground in February, as well as seeds. But if you are, like right now, if you're planting your own, growing your own transplants, then that you've already started them by seed inside. And then they'll be going in the ground in February. Now, February through March, through the middle of March, this is all, we're planting some, cooler season crops towards the end of the cool season. Those all are seeds that can be planted outside. After this, so after mid-March, the warm season plants are planted by seed pretty much throughout the rest of the next couple of months, next 4 or 5 months. So there's still time to get your warm season seeds. They're not outside quite yet. March is about the time when we'll, even maybe February a little bit, we'll be planting some warm season seeds. So you still have time to get those. Okay, so I wanted to talk about frosts and freezes. There are different types to prepare for, and there are different ways to prepare for them. This slide, I just wanted to make, just kind of have a reminder slide. I'm sure we all know freezing is 32 degrees. But a hard freeze is 28 degrees or below for an extended amount of time. So for a few hours, I'm saying like at least 4 to 6 hours. All right, so these are 2 common types of frost and freezes. First one is the advective freeze. If you live in Texas, you have probably experienced a blue northern, which this is what it is. It's a quick drop in temperature. I mean, in like 20 or 30 minutes, the really cold northern winds come through. The temperature drops like 20, 30 degrees in like 30 minutes. And normally it's a pretty dry wind. So it can dry out plants, which can be damaging, but sometimes there's precipitation with it, but not too often. And this can cause a black frost. So black frost is when you don't see frost on the outside of your plants, but the inside of your plants, the water in the plant cells freezes, and then that causes damage. All right, so that's a black frost. A radiational frost. So this one is different. This can happen after an advective freeze, and this is caused by temperature inversions, which we'll talk about in a second. So these happen on clear, cloudless, and still nights. That is like the great recipe for radiational frost. So like I said, it's a temperature inversion. So what this means is at ground level, there is cold air. And then you go up like 10 or 15 degrees, there's going to be a pocket of warm air, and then above that, it's going to be cold air again. And there's no mixing of the air. Okay, so it's going to be cold, hot, or cold, warm, cold. So what happens is the earth heats up during the day, right? And if there are clouds, it helps hold in the heat that warms up the earth during the day. If there are no clouds, then the heat is lost. So if it's a cloudy evening, it's going to help keep the earth a little bit warmer, keep your plants warmer. When it really gets detrimental is when it's cloudy during the day, and then at night, all the clouds dissipate and it's just all that warm air is just gone. So that's when it can get really hard and have like your plants can have some damage. For these, a lot of plant damage is going to be on the top and on the sides, like on the outside of your plants. And we'll talk about, do you keep the dead on there if you have damage, or do you cut it off? But that's where you'll see most of the damage. So low-lying and unprotected areas are going to have a higher risk of frost. So even if you have like bare-limbed trees in the wintertime, that's going to provide more protection for your plants versus no tree at all. And you can actually see a difference. I know in my yard I can of, even just like those bare limbs. It's surprising, but it does protect it. And then also, so open air, that can be a little more challenging to prevent frost. And then low-lying areas, cool air or cold air is heavier than warm air. So it's going to settle into those low-lying areas. So just be mindful of that. And that's called a frost pocket. All right, dew point does play a bit of a role in all of this. Dew point is the temperature when air releases moisture. So if it's above freezing, you see fog or you see dew. If it's below freezing, that's going to be frost because it's that frozen dew. Again, this can cause black frost, and you may need to protect plants if dew point is below freezing. So dew point is another number you can look at when watching the weather. One thing I do want to point out about frost and freezes, oftentimes the coolest part of the night is right before sunrise. So if, we get below freezing just for like an hour or two, chances are you don't need to cover and your plants won't be damaged. If they are, it'll be minimal. Now, if it's going to be below freezing for 4 to 6 hours, yeah, you might want to consider covering your plants depending on what they are and how mature they are. And again, we're going to talk about what to cover your plants with and what's the best way to prepare for those. If we just get a really, really hard frost or freeze, there's only so much you can do. So just because you protect it, just remember, does not guarantee success that it's going to pull through. If it's just stinking cold, it's just really cold. So, but we do our best. Okay, so let's talk about, let me make sure, there we go, didn't miss anything. Okay, so frost damage. Let's talk about what it can look like. This is from Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. This picture is a really great one. This is kale. It looks droopy. It looks water soaked. It does not look happy. That can be a sign of frost damage. Tip burn is another one. That's where the end of the leaves are brown. It just looks kind of burned and kind of is crinkly and papery. You can have a purple tinge to the leaves. I've seen that a lot. Be on the lookout for that one. Purple tinge is a big one. We just talked about tip burn. It can turn brown. Plant death, or part of the plant may die. But if there's still a chance of freezes and frosts after that event that killed part of your plant, I would keep it on. I would not cut off the dead part until all chances of freezing is past. Because if you keep that dead part of your plant on, it's actually going to protect the inside. And so whenever you cut it off in spring, when we're done with our freezes, you're going to have nice, protected, fresh growth that'll be ready to pop out in spring. So I know it may look bad, but consider keeping it on to protect the rest of the plant. Okay, so let's talk about what to cover exactly. Because I know for me, the garden at the food bank, most of my beds I grow mostly in raised beds, and most of them are very unprotected. They're far from the building. There aren't really many trees at all. And I didn't cover any of them, and I haven't had any damage yet from freezes. Hopefully it will stay that way, but I haven't covered because my plants are cold tolerant or cold hardy. So most cool season crops are going to be that way. And they are, so I have those plants, and they're also mature. If they're tender or young, you're going to want to cover them. If they are warm season crops, you're going to want to cover them. In this picture, these are eggplants. These are baby eggplants that I grew from seed. So those, yes, and a tomato plant. So if those were, if you're going to have a frost, I would definitely want to cover that bed because those are going to be very sensitive to frost. But really, if you have mature, cold hardy plants outside, you may not need to cover them. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then citrus, you also want to cover citrus here, whether that's moving them inside, moving them against the house, onto a porch, something like that. Okay, how to protect from freezes. So there are many things that we can do to protect from freezes. The first one being to water. You want to water your plants really thoroughly, at least a day before a freeze comes. That way, if the leaves get wet, they have time to dry before the temperatures drop, so the leaves don't have damage. Moist soil is warmer than dry soil. It also is going to help when the soil is evenly moist. It also is going to help protect from like the shrinking and swelling of the soil between freezing and unfreezing, and that also can cause root damage. So water can help protect in a couple different ways. I'm going to skip heat for 1 second and go down to covering. So covering, there's a lot of things you can cover with. Polyethylene film for hoop houses or tunnels. There's a lot of different thicknesses and things like that you can buy. It's really up to personal preference. If you go to a local nursery, they can probably direct you in what thickness you need and how long to keep it on and things like that. You can use a bed sheet. The thing with bed sheets is they're really thick. They don't really let in sunlight. A lot of, if you buy row covers from nurseries, oftentimes you can leave them on for a day or two, like for the whole day and overnight, and sunlight will still filter through and the plant will still get the sun it needs. For bed sheets, they're very thick and can be heavy. So I recommend if you're going to use bed sheets, please prop them up with, you know, some kind of pine garden stake or bamboo stakes or something. So it's not just, it's not smothering the plant, it's not touching it. It's not, the weight of it isn't on the plant. And then also take it off during the day, just move it off to the side so the plant can get sunlight, because that bed sheet will not allow sunlight to get in. And then we don't want to lollipop when we cover our plants. And if you live in Dallas, you've probably seen a lot of this. I'll show you a picture of it in just a second. So let's go back up to heat. You can do heat and covering together. Heat is going to be adding a shop light or a clamp-on floodlight underneath the covering of your plant. Just be really mindful, right? This is a fire hazard safety issue. So make sure that whatever you plug in is secure. You can definitely damage your plants and many other things if this goes wrong. So just be mindful of that. And then windbreaks. We kind of talked about this. So this is more of like moving your plants or your pots inside to your garage, up against your house, on your porch. If your plants are covered underneath a porch or right up against your house, you may not even need to cover them, because you know, it's going to be warmer up against your house. It's not out in the open like we talked about. And then mulch can help too. So you can use mulch leaves or hay, or you can use wood mulch. Hay or mulch leaves are preferred because they can break down and provide good organic matter for the beds for your plants. But wood mulch will work fine too. If you don't want to mulch the whole bed, you can just mulch around the base of the plant and kind of make a little circle around the base to protect, to kind of keep those root zones moist and protected. Okay, so this is what a lollipop is. So on the right, this is what we don't want. The ground provides heat, but when you just, you know, tie off and keep the foliage of the plant looking nice, that's not really going to help anything. Whereas on the left side, they have a light source that's providing heat. The ground is underneath the covering, so the ground heat's coming up. And then, of course, you want to secure whatever you're covering with, you know, rocks, bricks, gardening staples, something to keep it in place. So that is what you want to do, is on the left. Okay, and then plan ahead. Gardening can really sneak up on you very quickly. The seasons just doesn't stop, right? The world keeps on going, the weather keeps changing. So now is a time you still have a little bit of time to buy your supplies, prep your beds, maybe get some fertilizers or some kind of amendment for your soil. There are still seeds available. Like I said, 2020 was rough in finding seeds, but from my experience, I've still seen them around. So. And then our heavy planting season is about to start, like February, March, April. This is a very, and of course but initially get your garden going, like this is about the time to do it. So plan your garden, plan what you want to plant, prep your beds if you need to. Again, you still have time, and I do believe you can do it. Like I said, pots are a great place to start. So just keep that in mind. Okay. And I just have a few things here if you want to get involved with Jan's Garden at the North Texas Food Bank. On the right, this is a picture of our webpage for the Jan's Garden webpage. And this is where you'll find helpful videos on, you know, garden projects, things to help your garden. We also have handouts that you can utilize for composting and different gardening basics such as that. And we'll also post our next workshops there to sign up under workshops and events. So our next workshop is going to be in March. And the date is being finalized. So look on our social media for the next date, look on our website here at the Jan's Garden page for it, and we will keep you up to date and let you know when the next one's coming out. And then on the right, this is our partner garden page. So we have a partner garden program with the food bank where community gardens, you know, whether it's with a church or a school or just in the community, if they donate to a partner agency or a food pantry that works with the food bank, then they become a partner garden with us and they can help feed our hungry neighbors. So if you are involved with that, or you know somebody who is, please feel free to go to this webpage to learn more information. And then we also have volunteer positions. So we're looking for 1 to 2, we call them garden colonels, or just volunteers, consistent weekly volunteers to help in the garden with harvesting. No gardening experience is required. Right now we meet on Tuesdays from 9 to 11 a.m. So if you're interested, you can email the email at the bottom of the page. Same with the teaching assistant colonel. So this one's going to be more for in-person programming once that happens and it's safe to do so. And we do some garden programming for elementary school students. So this may be going to rec centers, this may be going to YMCAs, maybe even just the food bank. But this is going to be helping with classroom management, no prep required for the volunteers on the volunteers end. And it may require some traveling around the community, but not a whole lot. And it may be on weekends or weekdays. So again, this is just to put a little bee in your bonnet if you are interested in something like this. And lastly, y'all, I just want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. Hopefully you learned some new things. Feel free to stick around for Q&A. I know people are posting in the chat and I'm going to be answering those questions. Whenever you close out, there is going to be a survey that pops up. It's going to be on the Zoom webpage whenever you close out Zoom. So it's not going to be for Zoom. It's actually for us at the food bank to let us know, what topics you want to hear about. This is to make sure that we continue to give you relevant information that you need and that you want to hear about. So please fill out that survey. It'll literally take you less than a minute. But thank you again so much for joining us, and feel free to stick around for Q&A. I will be looking at the Q&A in the chat. So if you see me looking over here, that's because chat is on that screen. So yeah, we'll just start diving into those questions. And if anybody wants to hop off, thank you for joining us. Okay. How do I keep my cats out of my garden? That is a really good question. So I have not really had issues with cats before. There may be some kind of, so they actually will sell at nurseries like other animal urine, like predator urine, such as foxes. And sometimes you can kind of like put that, I don't know how big your garden is, but you can kind of put that around the perimeter of your garden. And that will sometimes keep things out. Bunnies are my worst enemy right now. But for cats, there's also maybe some like wildlife netting I've heard works really well for different things. Some people have even used, I've seen, oh gosh, I can't think of what it's called. It's like cattle or what is it? It's like, basically it's like metal, like mesh that you can put over your bed. I don't know if that's possible, but to put that over it too. Even just creating like a raised bed or something like that. Yeah, somebody's saying cayenne pepper and putting clear forks in their soil. Oh, that's smart. I have heard of that before because I think it's like they can't really see it, but they know something's there. So it kind of, prong side up. Yeah, that would be helpful. So for cats, yeah, I would actually, yeah, I think the clear fork thing is a good idea. And so is cayenne pepper. I've heard of that too. You can spray things with like, I think it's cayenne pepper, Dawn dish soap, and maybe something else. You can spray it on plants. It's hard because it also depends on how big your garden is to see like what's feasible. You know what I mean? So yeah, cats, and I'm sure cats, I don't know, they might dig a little bit in the garden. But I would see if there's any kind of like predator urine you can put out. Sometimes it's granular, sometimes it's liquid. Just be careful getting that liquid stuff on you. So yeah, I hope that we gave you some ideas for cats. Get a dog. Yeah, as a dog person, I'm all about that. Okay, so how do you prevent legginess in seedlings? Does it have anything to do with seed depth? So legginess in seedlings is going to have more to do with how far away your light is and what type of light source you're using. This is, I'm assuming, probably happening while growing things indoors. And I've had this problem before, and my issue's been lighting. So you might need to get different grow lights. You might need to move grow lights closer to your seedlings or whatever your light source is, because seedlings really like to be very close. We're talking like a couple of inches away, and be able to move that light up as the plants grow. So legginess is light because it's putting all its energy toward trying to grow towards the light, which is why like the stem is so long. It's trying to reach for that light, and I'm sure the leaves are pretty small. So that's where a lot of the energy is growing, is towards the light. So try moving the light source closer, or maybe switching a light source. Okay. Transplanting includes starting seeds indoors. So sometimes, yes, sometimes it does. Actually, it does include starting things indoors. Of course, you can buy transplants at the nursery, right? And you can just bypass that whole first step yourself. But you can, yeah, if you're going to be starting transplants, it's going to be indoors. Because oftentimes when you're starting things indoors, it's for the upcoming season. So it needs to be in a more controlled environment. Like right now, we're starting tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants indoors. If you're starting those now, it's too chilly outside to start those. So they're not going to germinate. Some pepper plants need like 90 something degrees, like the soil temperature to be that high to germinate. So I think they need at least 80 degrees to germinate. So that's why you also need a heat mat. So yes, you're starting them indoors. In August, here in Texas, August, September is when we can start planting things or getting things ready indoors to plant outside. So those are going to be your cooler season crops. And at that time, it's just too hot outside to start them outside. So yes, transplanting would be starting seeds indoors. That's right. Okay, do you need to test the soil every year or season? Yes, that is the best way to make sure you're on top of your garden being top notch. Generally, yeah, you can probably, I would say, do it maybe like twice a year. If you see a problem, if you see something's not growing well, or things look stunted, or things just aren't popping up, then yeah, it's time for a soil test then, regardless of when the last time was that you did it. So at least twice a year is really good. At the bare minimum once a year. But like here in Texas, we can grow all year round, so it's better to test your soil more often. So I'd say two times a year, and do it more if you want to. That is also totally fine. Okay. Oh yes. Will this video be available for viewing? Yes, it will be. You can find it at our North Texas Food Bank YouTube channel, and you'll be getting a link to that once this recording is completed, and I send out an email afterwards. So yeah, so sometime early next week, you'll be getting a link for the recording. Good question. I forgot to mention that. Where is the garden located? So correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that this is talking about Jan's garden at the food bank where I work. If it's not, if you're talking about a different garden, please type it in the Q&A. Yes, so the garden is located in Plano, Texas, which is North Dallas. The food bank is located on Maple Shade Lane, right off Coit Road in Plano. It's right like along President George Bush Turnpike. So the garden is next to and attached to the food bank there. Let's see. Oh, somebody asked what the brand name of the seeds I mentioned in the beginning. I mentioned Baker Creek seeds and also Botanical Interest. Both of those are very, very good. Botanical Interest is the one where there's more information inside the packet. So don't be so quick to throw it away. Okay. Starting lettuce indoors doesn't need a heat mat. Starting lettuce indoors does not need a heat mat. Really, the only things that will need it are tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. Those are the three that are going to need a heat mat, at least down here in Texas. But lettuce, since it's a cool season crop, you can start it indoors without a heat mat. And that goes with all cool season crops too. Now, root crops, I just want to say root crops are not started indoors. They are planted by seed directly outside. So we don't ever want to start those indoors. Okay, my plants, especially tomatoes and peppers, grow very tall but thin. What can I do to have stronger plants? Okay, so I'm assuming, to me, tall and thin means leggy, but that may not be the case. So if it's not the case, if it's not a light source problem, which is where the legginess comes in, then I would recommend adding some, so whenever you start your seedlings, so worm castings, first of all, regardless of the stage of growth, worm castings do amazing work. Worm castings, number one. Number two, and you can add worm castings or compost. You can add them right around the base of the plant, or you can dig a hole when you're planting it and sprinkle some worm castings, which you don't need much, or you can sprinkle compost at the bottom of the hole too, or again, around the base of the plant, either one of those. So I would either do one or both of those. And then I like to spray my plants with liquid seaweed. That is a foliar spray. You can get it on Amazon. It's pretty easy to find. You can also do liquid seaweed in a mix of fish emulsions. The mixture, it's either applied by spraying it on the plant or by a watering can, just mixing it with water. I know fish emulsions by itself, you can mix it with water and then pour it out on the base of the plant. But if you're doing just seaweed by itself, you spray that on the leaves and make sure the leaves are dripping, they're really covered. And that one you spray like once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. But liquid seaweed's great. It's all organic. It really boosts the immunity, just like compost. So it's really highly recommend liquid seaweed. And it's also hard to overdo it with liquid seaweed, compost, worm castings. That's why I like to use them, because if you use synthetic fertilizers, it's very easy to burn your plants. And if you overdo it, things can happen and your garden can be ruined. But if you use all organic, it's safer for the environment, and it's also better for your plants. So that's what I would recommend: worm castings, compost, and spraying it with liquid seaweed and or fish emulsions. Hopefully that helps you with that. Gives you some ideas anyways. Okay. In the photo with the eggplant seedlings, what did you cover the overturned yellow plastic cup with to attract small insects? Okay, yeah, so that's what that was. So if y'all didn't know what the yellow plastic cups were, I get this question a lot. So I just got regular yellow plastic cups. A lot of pests are attracted to the color yellow. So I put Vaseline on the outside of the cup. So it's just on, like, I cut up some, 1 by 1, like pine garden stakes, stuck like a push pin through the top of the cup onto the top of the stake. And then I just put a thick layer of Vaseline on the outside of the cup. I recommend it. Super easy, very cheap to keep up with. Obviously, if it rains or if it gets kind of gross every couple of weeks or so, you might need to reapply a new coat. But it was Vaseline that I put on the outside of the cup. And our next workshop is going to be on, I'm hoping and planning that it's going to be on pests and insects, seasonal pests and insects. That'll be a really intense one. There's a lot to cover in that one. So if you're interested in pests and disease, be on the lookout for our social media and our next workshop dates. And I will you can hop on the train for the insect one coming up. Okay, do you need to use the grow lamps to start inside? Yes. So if you're starting things inside, you must have a good light source. And you know what, off the top of my head, I cannot remember. You need to look at like the lumens and the Kelvin for getting the correct amount of light and buying the right light for it. Let's see, we have a video all about starting seeds indoors that I did last month. Again, that's on our North Texas Food Bank YouTube channel. It was done last month. So that I specify there what the Kelvin and the lumens are. But yes, you do need to use a grow light to start things inside because in the winter, we just don't have enough sunlight to get things jump started to grow. Now, there are a lot of different grow light setups. There's a lot of different lights you can try and use. There's more than one right way to garden, and there's definitely more than one right way to grow things inside. With all that being said, if you want to start seedlings in your windowsill, like once daylight savings time, or like once, spring forward hits, by all means, you'll probably be more successful then at that time of year when the sunlight's intensifying and we have longer days. But yes, grow lights are needed to start inside. But don't be overwhelmed by that, because there are many setups that for all kinds of budgets and space and things like that. Okay. Let's see. Oh, does liquid seaweed attract rodents? That's a good question. I have not had issues with that. My bunnies really have attacked hard. I don't want to call them my bunnies. They have been in my garden a lot. I don't want them there. They're not my pets. They're my enemies. But they, they really attack in the cooler ones when like other food for them is scarce. So they've really, really done some damage this year, especially November, December, January. And I was really using liquid seaweed a lot in the summertime, and I didn't have any issues there. And the things that I'm spraying with liquid seaweed are not necessarily the things that they are attacking. So in my experience, liquid seaweed has not attracted rodents. I had a rodent problem way before I started using liquid seaweed. So hopefully that helps you with that. Oh, fake snakes. I might need to try that. I'm willing to try just about anything and everything. If I could, I would, we're in Texas, so I would let people come out with, shoot the bunnies if they want to, but we're not doing that. To trap my dog in there for a whole day and let her just like have at it. Yeah. Fake snakes. That's good to know. I definitely need to keep that in mind. Okay. Feel free to put in any other questions. I'm looking through the chat to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Yeah, somebody mentioned in the chat that they're not from Texas, but good info. A lot of this info can be tweaked to your area, and some of it is like reading a seed packet. You can do that anywhere. It's pretty much the same. Yes, we talked about the clear forks and cayenne peppers. I have heard of that, so yes, I would definitely try that. And a lot of these kind of like DIY, you know, mixtures, or like these kind of like traps and things like that, they really don't cost a lot of money. So when in doubt, like I said, when in doubt, try it. That is a really good way to, you're not gonna be out too much money if you do something kind of homemade like that. Now, sometimes you are gonna have to like pull out the big guns and maybe spend a little bit of money, but generally, and that's how gardening is with seeds too, right? If you buy a few pots and some seeds, you're not out a whole lot if they didn't do very well. So that's kind of a good part about gardening as well. Okay, yeah, so Master Gardener suggested the fake snakes. And again, I think it's just different for everybody, wherever your area is. I think the bunnies in my garden are they're not scared of you. I have a wildlife camera out and they'll just sit and munch on things right in front of the camera. It's very annoying. Okay, so if there are any last questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. I'll monitor it for just a few more seconds to make sure if there are any other last minute ones. But y'all, thank you so much again for joining. Really appreciate it. I hope y'all learned something new, that you're inspired to grow your own garden, and that you can do it. I firmly believe that. So again, be on the lookout for our next workshops. And yeah, I don't see any more questions. Oh, let's see. Have you used a omit and alfalfa meal? I have not. So I think there's alfalfa meal in the dirt diet fertilizer that I mentioned. There's like alfalfa meal, bone meal, cottonseed meal, all these meals in this fertilizer, and it's in a pellet. So whenever it gets wet is when it breaks down. So I haven't used alfalfa meal by itself specifically, but I know people have used it. And like, I don't remember the exact benefits of alfalfa meal. I get them mixed up with bone meal, cottonseed meal, all that kind of stuff. But those are all organic fertilizers. But alfalfa meal, yes, I've heard of it. I think you can use it just fine. It might be one that needs to be mixed in with other organic fertilizers or amendments. I haven't heard of too many people using just alfalfa meal by itself, I don't believe. But again, if it works for you, please feel free to do it. But I know alfalfa meal is organic and it's good to go. And I hope that answered a little bit of your question. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any more, and we've been on the call for an hour, so I want to be respectful of your time. So thank you all again so much for joining us. And again, there's a survey on that Zoom page if you don't mind taking it. It'll take less than a minute. Again, that's for us to make sure that we're sending out relevant, helpful information to y'all in the community who actually want to grow things. So again, thank y'all so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time. So have a great rest of your day.